Everyone. We're doing the Double D's AFL Trade Wrap. I'm Dan.
And Dane over here. How is everyone? Dan, how are you, mate?
Can't complain, buddy. Not the most exciting draft period, eh? I mean, trade period, even.
No. I mean, I guess a lot of the, free agents and stuff all signed during the year, didn't they? So, obviously there was the over dramatic Danaher, Papley, Carlton, Essendon, and Sydney bit at the end. But apart from that, it was pretty uneventful, wasn't it? The Tim Kelly trade went through in about the first 35 minutes. So after that, it was a bit of a non-event. So.
Well, it was. I mean, there was no big names. Usually, traditionally, we get like a big name coming, but yeah, it was like Kelly was done like literally within 5 seconds of the window opening, and nothing happened after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Well, let's go through them then. So the Crows, now they were probably the biggest in the terms of what trades were going down. Now they lost 5 players and gained Billy Frampton from cross rivals, Port Adelaide. But quite a lot of key talent left this year. You got Jenkins, Keith, Greenwood, Jacobs, and obviously the Messiah returns to our team, Carlton, Eddie Betts. What do you think about that trade strategy? Because they didn't even do any trades involving picks.
So, no, well, I think when we spoke about it, after the first week, their strategy is pretty much going to be to. Oh, you're right.
You still see me?
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, sorry, dropped out there. Don't know what happened.
All right, we'll start that again from wherever you were last.
All right, so okay. So start again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put a note down.
Yeah.
I got.
Yeah, for me, Adelaide, I guess when we spoke after the first week, it was going to be, obviously they've gone with that big cull off field, and I guess for them it's going to be a full rebuild. They've got new coach, so I don't think it probably went as bad as first suspected. Like there was about 10 or so players that were linked to leave. There was Laird, the Crouch brothers, even Tex Walker's name was thrown up, Rory Sloane at one stage. So they did lose some players that have been pretty key for them over the last couple of years, but their midfield's still intact. They have got a key forward that's been the captain for the last couple of years. I think also, that's going to give guys like Fogarty, Himmelberg the chance to sort of play more games next year. Probably one thing they didn't do is probably get many high-end draft picks. So, they lost players, but, they got a lot of future picks next year. And as we know, the draft next year is compromised. So, were they as hurt as much as possible with the players left? Probably not, but would they be happy with the picks they get in? I don't think so as well. So overall, probably looking at about a D- for me in a grading. But, they've lost a lot of experience, but at the same time, they did keep a lot of their sort of stars as such in place. So, but what did you think?
I mean, it's a weird one because we've gone over the draft picks. They only received a pick 45 and 28 in trades for this year. So currently they've got 4, 23, 28, 37, 45 and 49. It's not a lot to do with if, like, people suspect they're in a rebuild, but they're not really rebuild picks, are they?
No, that's exactly right.
And then you look at the players they've delisted as well. They've delisted Hunter, Douglas, Otten retired. It's not really, they've kind of like gone big on the outs, but not really big on the ins.
Yeah.
But I think for me, D- is probably fair. I mean, it did look like an F at one stage, didn't it? With Sloan leaving.
Yeah. If Sloan and, one or both of the Crouch brothers had left, it would have been an F for sure. So, like, the fact that they kept, they're probably top-end players, whether they're A or B grade players, that's for Adelaide people to discuss, but they kept those guys intact. So, it probably just saves them from getting an F, I think.
And we picked 4. What do you think they'll do with it? Because like when you look at the Australians in this year's, there isn't aside from what Gould, that's about it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So when you get to 23 and 28, those Adelaide boys are probably going to be gone. So I think with 4, you just go best available for what their needs are. So whether it's a Sarong or a Lockie Ash, do they put a cheeky bid on Green and see if they might get him? But in saying that, they've probably got a lot of inside mids, sort of one pace. So, like maybe someone with pace. So like a Lockie Ash might be suitable for what they're looking at. So I think someone like that's going to just give them a bit of drive and, like it breaks the lines for me.
I could see him going for a Sam Flanders or a Caleb Sarong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's another one, Flanders.
Like for me, because he should be around there. Because I mean, Rowell and Anderson, that's 1 and 2 out of the way.
That's right.
And according to reports just come through now, that Hayden Young is evidently a lock to Melbourne.
Yeah, I think he'll go pick 3. It seems pretty much like that way, doesn't it?
So then you would say that Flanders would be best available for the Crows, guys?
I think so. He can play mid, he can go forward, he's hard at it, he's quick. He's exactly what Adelaide would need. So, yeah, Sarong, Flanders or Ash if they're looking for a running back. One of those 3 for sure.
Be interesting times. And a team that we've just discussed, Melbourne, a team that we want to avoid doing in Melbourne this year are the Brisbane Lions.
Yeah.
Because obviously they had a wonderful year. We know, similar to Melbourne last year, they came out of nowhere, young and exciting. Brisbane did, I'd say Brisbane did quite well. They got in Yeoman, Birchall and Archie. So they've got some experience in there and some big bodies to help out.
Absolutely.
How did you see their trade period going?
Yeah, pretty good. As we sort of said in the previous video, like they really are just looking at topping up, aren't they? So they've still got a very, very young side, one of the youngest lists available. So just getting more games into that midfield. Obviously, Neil and Zorko are the leaders there. So they didn't lose a lot. Louis Taylor has obviously gone to Sydney. But in saying that, like he probably only played 4 or 5 games, I'd say, for the year. So Link McCarthy probably overtook him. And then Charlie Cameron's probably the bee's knees when it comes to the small forward. So they didn't lose a lot. They gained some top-up players and some depth. So it's probably a C+. Didn't set the world on fire, but in saying that, they didn't lose any key parts. So it's just business as usual heading into 2020 for Brisbane, I think.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think one of the surprise ones was Cutler as well. Like they got rid of Cutler, Robertson, Keys, Walker and Bastianak as well. So they freed up a lot of salary cap space and a lot of space with with people who were just on the fringe of the 22.
That's right.
I do like their draft picks, though. They've got 16, 21, 34, 48, 52, 55 and 72. So there's quite good scope with them late first rounders. And then they've got that real nice, where the meat of the draft starts happening. So I think they've done quite well there as well with the picks they've acquired.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely a C for me. I think Brisbane have done well. They've got rid of not really best 22 players. I think Cam Ellis-Yeoman's a great get for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Another senior body in the middle, which is probably when you go into the finals, like you just saw, they got beat up a bit by Richmond and even GWS as well. So, Cam Ellis-Yeoman, he's not going to be a match winner, but, he can throw his body around and clear some room for Zorko, McCluggage, Lyons, those sorts of guys. So it's a smart move, even if he only plays 6 to 10 games during the year. Like he could be a vital asset come finals time.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I think Callum Archie's a great get for them as well. Because he could be anything, couldn't he?
That's right. Yeah, real sneaky sort of a last day pick that one, wasn't it? I think, former top 10 pick. And he should be a really good asset. Still very young too, only 22, 23 years old. So.
Yeah, well, it only cost him a future second and a future fourth, which is next to nothing. And if he plays to his potential, that could be a trade steal there.
Yeah, absolutely. Could be really good.
definitely a C for them. It'd be interesting to see who they go into the draft for as well.
Yeah.
With 16, there's a lot of good names around there. Like one of them that is in the 16 mark, Jeremy Sharp.
Yep. Yeah, very good user off halfback. The other one of their maybe slight deficiencies is maybe a key forward. Obviously, they got Hipwood up there, but they probably haven't got like a second key forward. So Fisher McCassie could be someone in that mid-teens. He has been linked with, I think Geelong's got 15 or 14, and
Yep.
just escapes me the team that's got pick 15. He's been linked with them as well, but he could be someone they look at if he's available, because he's probably the pick of the tall forwards. So he might be someone that they look at.
If they were looking at a project player as well, Dylan Williams is just around there. He's meant to be late 20s, early 20s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean that could be someone that they look at as well.
Yeah, I think as we said, like for Brisbane, it's going to be business as usual next year. And whoever they take at that 16-21, it's probably just good depth. They can spend a couple of years in the twos, just developing. And if they get some senior games next year, it's a bonus for them.
So I think about C's about fair for the old Brisbane.
Yeah, definitely.
And now we move on to probably the trade disappointment. A lot was promised from our beloved Carlton, and we ended up with Betts and Pittenay were our major ins.
Yeah.
Probably not the trade period everyone expected. We did keep all of our picks, and we didn't really lose anyone either. The only trade we were doing was Phillips, and you'd say Pittenay is just a like for like.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now the dust has settled and you've slept a few times. How do you feel?
Well, to tell you the truth, I haven't actually slept for the last 2 weeks. I'm still getting over it. I think you're right. It's a tough one, isn't it? Like, obviously, we were all in for Martin and Papley since basically the season finished in September. But as you say, we didn't actually lose anyone. So Phillips wanted 2 years. We offered him 1. So we've got Pitnet, who's 5 years younger, similar sorts of players. So, he's probably going to be coming into his prime. What his ceiling is, we're not going to find out probably for the next couple of years. But yeah, so you're sort of caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. Eddie Betts has come back. He's probably, as we said, is better than anyone we've sort of got in that position, although he is 33. But yeah, we didn't lose any substantial picks or players. So it's sort of 6 of one, half a dozen the other. I'd sort of feel it's probably a fail because we were so public with the guys that we were going after, and both of those guys fill a need. So it's probably a C minus. If you had to ask me the day of the last day of trade period, it was probably like a F minus, Z minus, something like that. But I think we didn't lose any major players or picks. So in that regard, it's a positive, and we get an upgrade on the small forward position. So it's a C minus because we didn't get those targets, but it's not the end of the world.
I think that's spot on. I mean, I also think as well, we have got an in as well. We haven't discussed there in Doc as well. So I think the trade is probably a CD, the trade period. Yeah. But I think when we do our video on the draft and we do the whole postseason, I could see it being an A. Yeah. I really could, because we've kept all of our picks. Like, a lot of Carlton fans were saying we should have gone 2 first-rounders for Papley, 2 second-rounders for Martin, really forced the hand. But I think if you look at it that way, we would have literally stymied ourselves for 2 years. And right now, we've got an open checkbook. Our team is better. The 22 is without a doubt better.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, for me, I think it's a C. I do think a C is fair, because we lost one player who was a fringe player in Phillips, and we've gained Betts, which I think he's first 22 in the all next year. So
yeah, that's right. So it is an upgrade on what we had, and as you say, we did keep all our picks. obviously the priority was to get senior players in. But, like I've got no doubt we'll go hard. There's plenty of big free agents lined up for next year. So no doubt Carlton's going to be linked to 101 of them. So, we kept all our picks intact. The Jack Martin situation, there's something still on the table. There's a couple of different scenarios with maybe he gets picked up in the pre-season draft. If Gold Coast and Carlton can come to some sort of trade with draft picks, then they've said they'd be willing to let him go as a delisted free agent. And then we can pick him up basically for nothing. But those two different scenarios have a lot to play out still. It'd be interesting to see if they come to fruition. If not, we go into the draft with pick 9. For me, I would be picking on need. Some other people out there have sort of said pick best available, but I think we should go for need. If Cody Waitman doesn't go at pick 8 to Melbourne, he would be my pick. Other players sort of linked. I think we've spoken about this a couple of times. That we should look at bidding on Liam Henry as well, because Fremantle have pick 10, and there's no way that they'll take Liam Henry. They'll just wait for a bid to come through, which means they get 3 first-round draft picks. Whether they balk or not, that's another question. But if it's not those two, then you'd probably look at best available in that scenario. And for me, that'd be Devon Robertson. So he'd be an immediate help for Cripper in the midfield, and he can play across half back too. So
it's going to be interesting to see what we do with pick 9, because I'm just on a video with Blue Abroad for the draft, and Waitman, I've got massive raps on him.
Absolutely.
I will be gutted if he ends up Melbourne, but there is talk that he's starting to slide in the draft because of his work rate, which is one of his issues. So It'll be interesting to see if that does put Melbourne off, because I know that there's talk as well from Melbourne fans that they're really into Caleb Sarong as well.
Yeah, okay.
So it's really hard when you look at the draft. There's a good argument for all the top 10 going to 10 different clubs. So it's really literally look at the draw here. But I'm with you. I mean, I'm happy. I personally believe, in controversial, unpopular opinion, I think if we end up getting Martin for free, we get, say, Cody Waitman or whoever's around there at that time, Robertson, we do well, because there's a lot of good players going 40 to 60 as well. There's a lot of good players. We've mentioned them before. Pickett's one of them. There's some really good footballers around that draft pick. Thompson Dow, another one. Like, we could maybe look back at this draft in 5 years, and I actually think this could be the most important Carlton draft.
Definitely.
Because
it's the finishing touches basically on the list. That's probably about 85% right. It's just those last couple of positions that they need to fill in, whether it comes from experienced players or, as you say, like they actually fill those needs through the draft. And we see that come to fruition in 5 years. That's going to be interesting to see what happens there.
Oh, definitely. And a team that stole our favourite trade is Collingwood. We were big fans of Darcy Cameron as the Phillips replacement.
Yeah.
And that was incidentally Collingwood's only in. It was an interesting pick as well, because it was 62 and they got 56 back.
Yeah, absolutely. So, they
were pretty quiet.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. They were pretty quiet. Obviously, the talk was that they've got salary cap issues. Obviously, Aish has gone to Freo. There was talks that maybe Phillips was going to go. That didn't sort of eventuate. Obviously their list is, 99% right. They're going to be pushing top 4 again next year. So it was neither really here nor there, probably a C. They just topped up, Darcy Cameron, he's in that range, 23 years old. He can go forward or he can play in the ruck. He's probably an upgrade on Mason Cox. And I've seen a lot of him from his junior years when he was playing at Claremont over here in Perth. So he's a very, very good footballer. He'll get opportunities at Collingwood next year. So, it's in that C range. Wasn't a big trade period, but it didn't have to be for Collingwood this year. So,
Yeah, I think they were kind of stymied as well because they had 0 picks. So, like,
Yeah,
as it stands at the moment, 35, 62, 74. There
yeah,
wasn't really much to go. There wasn't really any free agents to speak of as well.
yeah,
I do find it a bit of a surprise, though, Sam Murray was delisted because they were
yeah.
very public about sticking by him.
That's
And yeah, out of nowhere, he got delisted. So, I mean, I wonder if that puts other clubs off Sam Murray.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, and obviously he's come out this week or just as recent as this weekend saying that, like he's been working hard and he's learned a lot and he wants that second chance. He sort of burst onto the scene coming down from Sydney. He had that, I think it was 2017, first half of the year. He was really, really good. Obviously, he's quite quick. Skills are up and down, but he definitely, I think, has the ability to fill a need at another club. Whether, as you say, Collingwood delisting him gives other teams a bit of a holdback or not, that'll be to see. But I think he definitely could fill a need on a few lists.
I just think, when a team makes a public statement of we're standing by him and we're giving him a second chance, and he never got the second chance to play, and they
That's right.
delisted him at first opportunity. If I was a list manager, I'd be kind of thinking, why did you delist him then?
Yeah.
Like, has he done it again and we don't know?
Know about it. That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just one of them weird ones.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'd agree with you. Nothing lost, nothing gained, really. I mean, Ish, they've got cover for him, particularly in the emergence of Quino. He looks a real footballer. So I think they did well because Cameron, I think, gives them that need as well. Two rucks were very popular in 2019, and I
Yeah.
think that'll continue. And he gives you that option.
Yeah, especially the ones that can go forward. And like if you check through what Darcy has done in the NEFL, like he's getting 15 to 20 possessions and kicking 1, 2, 3 goals every week. So he's got the ability to go forward and hit the scoreboard. Like that is worth its weight in gold as a ruckman this day and age. Like if you can spend 50 or 60% forward, hit the scoreboard, like he's only going to maybe play 5 minutes a quarter behind Grundy. Like it's his ability to kick goals that is probably what got him to Collingwood and what they wanted from him.
Do you think there might be an element of they've got Cameron in just to test the waters to see if he could cope? Should Grundy move interstate?
Could be. I guess that's going to hog the highlights until Grundy signs next year. Whether that happens early or whether it doesn't happen, I don't know. But it could be, as we said, like Cameron's 23, so he's coming into his prime. Maybe there is a couple of games where they give him 70-80% of the ruck duties just to see, and then see what comes of it. I doubt that Grundy's going to go, but with the media, it's going to play out in our lives every day, all day next year.
Even though I hate Collingwood, I personally hope he doesn't go. I think he's great to have in Melbourne, isn't he? Well,
Yeah,
not in Melbourne.
Yeah. Someone said it during the year, like your big Melbourne clubs, like for the AFL, you want your big Melbourne clubs doing well. Collingwood, Richmond, Hawthorn, Carlton, Essendon. Like you want to see those games where there's 80, 85, 90,000 every weekend. So for a successful AFL, you want to see successful big clubs. Like if Grundy goes, that's going to leave a big, big hole for Collingwood. So.
Oh, definitely. And a team that nearly lost key players were Essendon. They did ever so well to keep Danaher, depending what side your fence are on. I actually thought Essendon had a great trade period. As a Carlton fan, it pains me to say it, but I thought that the list manager and the list management team, I thought they did brilliantly well because contracted players, you don't have to do a deal. And
That's right.
And I think pretty much what they ruined about 3 or 4 trades, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right. And you're right. Like and we went through it with Bryce Gibbs 3 years ago. He had 3 years left on his contract, so we stood firm that first year and said no. The second year we made a deal and we got 2 draft picks. Essendon stood firm. The Fantasia dealing with Port Adelaide, that was just really weird. I don't know what happened there. Like like he apparently nominated Port, and then Port Adelaide said we'd never even spoken to him, and then he's staying at Essendon. Like, that was really, really weird. But yeah, like you say, it pains us because the Danaher deal was linked to Papley as a Carlton supporter, but good on Essendon for sticking firm, holding it. Whether they can, like, turn them around and make them want to stay at the club next year, that's for them to do now. But yeah, for me, they got Cutler, which was an interesting one from Brisbane. You'd probably say, like, outside midfield run is one thing they have an abundance of. So that was quite interesting that they sort of went that way. On his day, he's a very, very good player, good skills. He has had some injury issues, so if he can get over those, he'd definitely be an asset for Essendon. Probably say B-. They didn't bring any superstars this year, but as you said, they didn't lose any of their key players. So like, it wasn't a super draft trade period, but they didn't lose any of their stars. So B- for me for the Bombers.
I think that's fair. I think it's somewhere between a C and a B. Like, Cutler, I thought was an interesting one. I think that said to me that McGrath is going to go on the ball full time, and Cutler's going to take his spot off halfback.
Yeah,
that's kind of what that smelt to me. Because I agree with you. Outside, that's all Essendon have. So it'd be an interesting one. I mean, obviously, I thought the best bit of business they did was involving themselves in the Tim Kelly trade.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, moved
because
up.
They gave up 37 and got 33 and 57 back.
Yeah, that's
right. Which I thought was probably the best bit of business by Essendon.
Yeah.
And I think Phillips gives them much needed support because the Zach Clark experiment didn't work, did it?
No.
Thought that was a good in. But for me, I thought good job well done by Essendon. Like, I hate to say it, but didn't lose anything and gained two players that I think will help them moving forward.
Probably feels nice, yeah, absolutely.
And then your brother's team, Big Fremantle.
The Big Freo, yeah.
Well, I mean, they were quite active, surprisingly, weren't they? Because the Hill trade was like dragged on, and then suddenly it was done overnight when there was reports that it was off, which I thought was very weird. But they lost Langdon Hill and they gained Aish, so it wasn't probably the best period for them personnel-wise. But when you look at Freo's picks, they're in pole position, surely, to do some damage in the draft.
Yeah. Well, they've got pick 7 and pick 10. I dare say they're going to be praying that a bid doesn't come on Henry before pick 10. So then they've got access to use those two picks and then, match a bid later on in the first round, which will give them 3 first-round draft picks. Langdon, really good running machine, but speaking to a couple of Freo supporters that I know quite well, they sort of call him the butcher. How much of a loss? He gets a lot of the ball, but like they say, if you get 30 touches but you turn it over 15 times, is it that effective? So Hill's a big loss for me. He's damaging. He's a line breaker. Look, did they push too hard to try and get that Hill deal? They wanted pick 6. They wanted a future first and a future second. Those were sort of Tim Kelly sort of trade picks. So and then St Kilda went and made a deal with GWS, and so they had no choice but to get a lower pick. So they probably lost a bit more than what they got in. So it's probably a C- for me overall for Freo. But like you say, they do hold some pretty good cards to go back to the draft this year. There's a lot of solid West Australian talent, which is probably the way they should be looking going into the first round. Obviously, Henry they'll pick up. Jackson, he's an interesting one because they do need a ruckman, but do they pick him at 7 or will he get through to 10? It's an interesting scenario because I think most of the scribes are sort of saying he's probably a top 5 talent, but ruckman just don't have that same value anymore going into the draft. So I think Freo will take him, but yeah, do they take him at 7 or do they take him at 10? That's what we'll have to find out.
I think it'd be interesting. I mean, I think one of the most underrated picks was Blake Acres as well.
Yeah, totally.
He's got good running capacity. He's fairly quick. He does use it well as well. He's not a mug. So I mean, for me, Asian Acres, I think more than replace what they've lost. I know that might sound stupid. Hill's a phenomenal player, but I agree with the Langdon. I've never really seen enough of Langdon for me to be wowed by him.
Yeah.
I think he's a very steady footballer. Hill on his day can turn. For me, I think Akers and Aish, and you think the Western Australian talent's phenomenal this year. Like you've got Robertson, he's a phenomenal player. Robertson, Flanders. I mean, Flanders would be an instant replacement for Hill. He's quick. He knows where the goals are. He's probably a more attacking Hill anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, if they came out this draft period a bit like Carlton and they managed to pick up Flanders, Robertson, or maybe the Ruckman and ended up getting Henry with their first 3 picks.
That's a good draft.
You'd probably give that an A, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
if it'd be an A or a B, wouldn't it?
Yeah, as I said, they'll be praying that Henry doesn't get bid on before that pick 10, so they're guaranteed to get him and get 3 first-round draft picks. So if you, like you say, if you get any combination of Flanders, Robertson, Jackson, and Henry, 3 of those 4, that's going to set them up. All of those guys are going to be 200-game players, 10-year careers. So that'll work out well for them. They'd be happy with that.
Oh, 100%. I think a C is probably fair. And I think, again, they've got that prospective A after the draft. When we do a conclusion of the postseason, they're well on with an A.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then next up, Dad's Army are out in the middle of nowhere, Geelong Cats.
Yeah.
Doing what they do best and picking up that same age demographic that they always seem to do. So they lost Kelly, they lost Zach Smith, which is no big loss. And brought in Jenkins and Jack Stephen, the man who's been linked, I think, with Geelong for like 3 years in a row. Interesting because I thought the biggest shock for me was at the end of the trade period when they delisted people. To see Wally Buzzer go, I was quite shocked at that.
Yeah, he was a cult hero at Geelong, wasn't he? Interesting period for them. Like obviously they did get 4 draft picks for Kelly, but they haven't got a top 10 draft pick. So, all the talk is that this year's draft is not as deep as last year's. So 14, 17 and 24, do they fill needs? Do they look at trading up, maybe 14 and 17 or 24 to get into the top 10? Because I think I heard the other day the only top 10 draft pick they've had in the last decade or so was Cockatoo, I believe, in maybe 2015, pick 9.
Yeah.
So they, so that's an interesting one. Obviously, Tim Kelly's not replaceable. Like you're not going to get like for like. Stevens, if he gets fit and he's really good mentally, he could be a serviceable player. Gets forward, he's hard at it. But like you say, their age demographic is still at the top end. Jenkins is a top-up, probably gives a bit of a cop-out to Hawkins. So it might take a little bit of pressure off him. But, Ablett's going around 1 more year. So 2020 is all or nothing. I think if they don't win it, then, that's it for them, isn't it? So they really need to make sure that this draft they really hit the mark. So, yeah, whether they use those 3 top 24 picks well or whether they use them to move up, that's a question they're probably asking themselves every day at the moment. So, I'd say probably a B because, I don't think they got enough to replace Kelly. As I said, he's irreplaceable, but they haven't got a top 10 draft pick. I think they would be wanting that. So, yeah, interesting times for Geelong.
Yeah, I mean, my gut says B because you can see Geelong are building for a flag now. You can see that they haven't got any inclination of 10 years down the track. It's all or nothing. And Stevens and Jenkins, I think, give them what they lacked last year as well.
Yeah, that's right.
I think, though, this is another team that I think at the end of this period could be an A. And that's if they got, say, Fisher McCasey and say they managed to snare Josh Worrell, a good one of the best key defenders in the draft. There you've got your replacements there for the outgoing Henderson, because Taylor's not going to play forever. You've got a future Taylor there, and then you'd also have a future Hawkins. So for me, I think if they did that, you could probably say they've got a good pick because there's a lot of solid Melbourne-based players in the 20s as well.
That's so. Right.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think I can see what Geelong are doing. I'm not a big fan of it. I think they got a good price though for Kelly. I really do. And I know one of my good friends is a Geelong fan. He was telling me that this is his lock. My mate Miles. He said Trent Rivers will go with 24.
Yeah.
That's who they're after.
Yeah, I would say yes, but one question mark is that Freo have got pick 22. So, and I think it'll be 6 or one half a dozen of the other, Trent Rivers or Jeremy Sharp, if they're both there, because they both play similar roles. So they might get one of those two. I think they'd be happy with either of those guys. And with Jordan Clark, who they got last year, that sets them up across half back for the next decade. Both very, very classy footballers.
Do you reckon Freo will have 22 there? Because you'd imagine someone surely thinks for Henry.
Yeah, that's true. So that may actually go. Yeah. So if that does happen, then Rivers may be available. Richmond may, from what I've been told, may look at him as well. So I think that they'd probably Sharp and Rivers will both be around about that pick 24.
Interesting times for Geelong because you would say with their list it's this coming year or not at all.
Yeah, that's it. Well, yeah, Ablett's gone around one more year. The Jenkins, he's obviously come in. You know, there was a lot of pressure on Hawkins this year. Had a good year, but I think the two talls. You know, teams are going back to the 2 and 3 taller players. So it feels like it's all in for 2020, and then worry about 2021, the following year, whether they get rid of some older players and go back to the draft. But it feels like they've gone all in this year for sure.
And then a team that are probably the other end of the scale, probably just aiming not to win a wooden spoon. Gold Coast, they've got just about every pick that matters in the top 3. They've got 1 and 2, so no surprise they'll end up with Anderson and Rowell. I'd like to see Gold Coast though burn pick 1 for Green.
Yeah. It's and there has been,
to me, both of them are similar. Anderson and Rowell are very similar footballers.
Yeah, that's right. And there's talk that may still happen, just to see if GWS balk. It's probably worth asking the question of them. Because the other thing you sort of look at GWS's list is, do they actually need Green? You look how deep their midfield is, especially with all the injuries that they've had this year. Like, it's hard to see guys like Haitley and Caldwell playing next year. So if you had Green, is he actually going to play? And, their midfield, they're predominantly 23, 24, 25-year-olds. So I definitely think it'd be worth Gold Coast looking at bidding on him for sure.
Because you'd also say as well, you've got Taranto, Whitfield, Hopper. I would say if they picked up GWS, there's going to be a chain reaction next year in the trade.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, look, at the end of the day, they have an abundance of really, really good midfielders, and kudos to them for doing that, doing well and being able to hold most of those players. But there's going to be a tipping point for them, whether it's next year. Who knows? But yeah, it would definitely be worth Gold Coast bidding on them. They got a couple of senior players in, which was really good. Greenwood. They also got Ellis from Richmond. So they will help. Those guys aren't superstars, but they will definitely help. They're going to get the two best players in the draft, whoever they may be, as you say, whether they bid on Green or if they take Rowell and Anderson. Another guy that we haven't seen in, this year because he had injuries, if he gets himself right, is Rankin. And he is a serious, serious footballer. So, like he could help them improve from day one next year. So, really interesting.
I think it'll be interesting how they go because I thought Ellis was a phenomenal pickup. And I think Greenwood, he's going to have a chance to shine. I think he's been underused by the Crows. I rate him highly. I think he's clean by foot. He's got a good attacking threat. He uses it well. I think Zach Smith's a great get as well. I was surprised Geelong with their heavy documented ruck struggles.
Yeah.
Zach Smith. So for me, I think when you have Rowell, Anderson, or maybe, for me, if they added a Green and they added a Rowell, I think, wow, that's some serious football. And then with Rankine to come back as well, with Lukosius, he started to show a bit at the end of the year. I mean, for me, their trade period is probably an A-. I know it's high, but they only lost Archie, who hasn't played for them for like nearly 2 years.
Yeah, that's right.
And I thought they got in two quality experienced players and they managed to keep hold of them prized possessions 1 and 2.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they didn't, as you say, prized possessions. They didn't trade out too many picks. So I'd say an A- as well. They'd be pretty happy. They got some experience in. They're going to get the two best kids in the draft. So they'd be pretty happy with that.
Controversial opinion. I've done one already. I can see them not finishing bottom.
Yeah, I think so too. You'd probably say bottom 4 for sure, but I don't necessarily think that they'll win the wooden spoon next year.
Especially if all them players stay fit, because it's a very exciting list. And I think Stewie Dew probably plays positive football, which the young kids will respond to.
Well, you look at how they came out of the blocks last year, or this season just gone. They won 3 out of their first 4. Then they lost 18 in a row. So it's just about, like obviously you're going to get another summer into these younger kids. So whether they can sustain that form for longer. There was a game, they lost to Essendon by, like a goal, and there was another couple of close games that they probably could have stolen. But yeah, so I can see them definitely improving on their stature from this year for sure.
Oh, 100%. And the other franchise team, GWS, I thought, an interesting trade period because I know we're talking about Green and they worked very hard to get pick 6. That was probably their big movement of the trade period. We know they managed to acquire Jacobs, and we know they lost Patton and Bonner, 2 players who haven't played really in a year and a bit, so that was no big loss.
Yep.
But be interesting to see because I was always under the illusion as you that Green was maybe available because of all the class.
Yeah.
Especially with Coggy re-signing.
Yeah.
Really interesting to see how they're going to fit Green in because he's a Cripper clone, isn't he? He's a Patrick Cripps clone.
Yeah,
so
that's
exciting.
Right. He's going to be a gun, but like you say, Ward will be back next year. Canelio, Taranto and Hopper came on leaps and bounds this year. Whitfield as well had a really, really big year. Then you've got Caldwell, Haitley, who they drafted last year. So, I mean, they've got, 2 or 3 like starting midfields. They'd get games in any midfield in the competition, those 8 blokes. So is there a need for Green? Probably not. The other thing is, like he's an academy player. So is there, because he's a top 10 pick, is it like a service that they will take him? But like for me, there's not actually a need for it. Like they probably have more of a need for like a small forward or like a running halfback flank. He's sure signed on for another year, but there's probably those positions are more of a need. So it's going to be interesting to watch because I do think there will be a bid on Green before their pick 6. If he gets through Gold Coast, I can see Sydney bidding on him at 5. But But yeah, it's just going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they've done so well, I think, as well, to always keep that talent and always keep it locked. So they seem to have a wonderful way of rotating these players as well. I mean, maybe if they get Green, are they going to rotate Canelio more at half forward, which they were doing a lot last year?
Yeah.
That frees up a mid spot. But I mean, I think one problem that occurred for them is Hopper was like Mr. September, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right.
He suddenly became dominant and started to use that big body.
Yeah, him and Taranto, they had. I mean, Taranto won the best and fairest, so they sort of came on. Zach Williams had a fantastic year as well. So, hey, as Carlton supporters, I wish we had this problem that you couldn't fit everyone in. It's a really good problem for them to have. So, quite jealous and envious of them.
It'd be interesting as well because I think Tomlinson going as well kind of maybe says the Green's coming, they're making way for him.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I'd say, for me, it's probably a B. Like the fact they've moved up in the draft again, they've got pick 6, 12 and 18. There's just not really a need for them, so they're going to get another top 10 pick. So I'd say a B. They lost Tomlinson, but that was probably going to happen from about round 5. So they've got plenty of stock there that would fill that position, as you say, whether it's Green, whether it's one of the other young guys that comes in that they've already got on the list.
I mean, one of the things that I was actually thinking earlier, Brodie Kent fits the bill of what GWS need. Someone that can play both key position plays and play on the ball.
Yeah, definitely.
Basically Tomlinson.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, like he's got an ACL, so he's probably not going to play in 2020. So it gives him time just to get a fit, especially going to Sydney from Melbourne. So it gives him time to get used to another environment. And yeah, like you say, like a couple of older forwards and backs, he can go forward or back, or play in the midfield. So he that's a good shout. That's someone that they could probably look at as well.
It's going to be an interesting time because, like having picked 9 is quite exciting for Carlton fans, I think, because anything can happen before then. Like if you look at the top 6 draft boards on the internet at the moment, I think pick 9 has 6 different players.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there was one I was reading this morning, ESPN updated theirs, and like Robertson was pick 15.
Yeah.
So it's like, really exciting that just say Adam Green, everyone suspects GWS to match. If they don't, it throws chaos again.
That's right.
That I mean, that's why if I was Gold Coast, I would burn pick 1 on Green.
Yeah, that's right. And just, test them out, see what they do. Absolutely.
Interesting. And a team that likes mind games, Hawthorn. So they just go about their business so well. Sam Frost, and finally, the worst kept secret in football, Patton joined. And they only lost Pittenay, who was, their 3rd ruckman anyway. Segler and McAvoy owned that spot. I thought some really good ins for him. I think Sam Frost, and you just know Clarkson with Patton, he's just going to be a superstar, isn't he?
Yeah, that's exactly right. They seem to have that ability to get players on the park. So Scully last year, O'Meara from 3 years ago, both had really solid years. Frost fills a need. Patton will fill a need when he can get on the park. And, I've got some really good Hawthorn mates, and they're pretty happy that they're going back to the draft in the first round for the first time in a number of years. So yeah, like I'd say, look, it wasn't an outstanding period, but at the same time, they didn't give anything up. So probably quite similar to Carlton. Like it's a C+ for me. They didn't get any superstars, but they have filled a couple of needs and have got a good pick in the draft. Similar to a couple of other sides, they've got pick 11. They're probably fingers crossed that they don't get a bid on Finn McGuinness before pick 11, because his stocks have risen. He had a really, really solid back end of the year, and obviously at draft camp he was elite. So there is a chance that he might get bid on before pick 11, but they'll be hoping that he doesn't.
It's interesting because two draft boards I saw this week had Carlton bidding for Big Finn and also Melbourne. So, I mean, that could throw it in. I mean, historically, though, teams don't often bid for these academy players, do they?
No, no,
It's kind of like a gentleman's agreement.
yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, if you go back through history without even looking, probably, 80% plus of academy players do get matched. So I think that's why, teams tend to shy away from actually bidding on those players. You look at Blakey last year. I mean, consensus is he's probably a top 5 pick in that draft, but he didn't go till pick 10. So Sydney would have been stoked with that. So yeah, that'll be another thing to watch, because there is 3 or 4 players in academies that are due to go around that top 10 draft pick. So yeah, that'll be interesting to watch.
I think it'll be an interesting one because, like, with the academies, like there was the famous case last year, Hawthorn with Irving Mosquito. He was meant to be a pick 50. They had 3 picks in the 50s. Essendon had a cheeky punt at him, and amazingly, Hawthorn didn't match. So there is a lot to be said that I think a lot of these teams have a mental note where they think he'll go. Because you would say that Fisher McAsey must be Hawthorn's number 1 pick if he can.
Yeah, absolutely.
He would suit the shot. I thought Sam Frost as well was a great pickup. I was always shocked last year when they got rid of Ryan Burton. Yeah. And I think Sam Frost kind of fits that bill. He can play small or tall down the back. Also has masquerades up the top as well. So I think he's a very similar type of player. He's probably not as good as Ryan Burton, but I think he's definitely similar.
He fills a need. He's in his mid-20s, so he'll slot straight in from round 1 next year. So yeah, it's a good pickup for them for sure.
Yeah, I think a C's fair for Hawthorn. I think Hawthorn will just be crossing fingers and toes that no one puts in a bid for Finn, and they can somehow turn that into 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, totally.
And then up next, Melbourne. So probably the disappointment. I had Melbourne as favourites this year. I thought Melbourne were going to make the final, so I was genuinely shocked. Good bits of business, though. They managed to snare pick 8, which I thought was good. They managed to involve themselves, and I thought got a good price as well for Ed Langdon.
Yeah.
And they probably let Frost go for unders, but their picks, 2 picks in the top 10, and they managed to acquire Ed Langdon and Tomlinson. I think really good trade period for them.
Yeah, totally. Like those guys are going to fill a need. The outside run and carry is something that Essendon have lacked. The inside midfield work is really strong. But Tomlinson and Langdon, like those guys would be in the top couple of percent, running and stamina wise. So those guys are going to get their hands on the ball, be able to move the ball upfield. As you say, they got pick 8, so they've got 2 top 10 draft picks this year. So they've been linked to several different players. So they sort of hold a good card across that top 10. What they're going to use them on, it's hard to say. They probably need a small forward, so one of Sarong, Waitman, Flanders. Looks, as we said, probably Young's going to go with pick 3, who's just an elite ball user and quick off half-back, so he could be really, really good for them. But yeah, they'll be looking to rebound from this year to something similar to the 2018 year. I'd probably say a B+. They didn't get any superstars in, but they got a couple of needs, and they get a second pick in the top 10. So all round pretty good. Didn't have any huge losses out the door, so not a bad period for them.
Yeah, I mean, 3-8 and 97. I think if they pick up, say, Hayden Young, and say they get a Waitman, heaven forbid, because that's who I want at Carlton. But if they get that, definitely I think you can put your house on they will get back in the 8 next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And they just signed Sorry, his name just escapes me. The former trainer from Port Adelaide, Darren something or other. I can't remember who it was. So he's like Russell at Carlton. He's one of the top fitness gurus. So they've signed him moving into next year. So that's a really good addition for them. Probably. Yes, that's it. Yeah, from Port.
Arsenal.
Yes.
The Arsenal fitness expert.
Yeah, so that's probably, like what we said last year for Carlton getting Russell, Burgess is probably as good a pickup for them off field as any. So that's going to help them. And Melbourne's come out and admitted they got the off season wrong this year. Like with rehab and injuries and surgeries and stuff. So it's a big learning curve. So I think they're a team that will rebound next year for sure.
Oh, definitely. I think for me, Melbourne did really well, and I think Tomlinson as well. He's going to really slot into that hole left by Jordan Lewis. Giving midfield time, halfback time, big, strong, no nonsense. I expect big things from him. And over to a team that usually dominate the headlines, but were ominously quiet all trade period. That was North Melbourne, only acquiring Mr. Aidan Bonner in their trade period. They managed to do a couple of trades with their pick 8 to get 26.50 in a future first. So obviously not looking at the draft this year as well with that. That was an indication. Yeah. They have got my highlight of the postseason though, because they did a press release when Tom Wilkinson quit and they delisted him. And the reason was quit to be on the Amazing Race, which which I actually thought was brilliant when you go through their delistings and there's retired, delisted, quit to be on the Amazing Race.
That's
brilliant.
So
it was brilliant. It doesn't say much about North Melbourne, but it did make me laugh. I also enjoyed as well the fact that if you actually go on the delisting, you can actually click a link to the Amazing Race through the AFL. So really clever marketing by the AFL pushing that.
Absolutely.
But to me, it's a weird one why they didn't want to go to the draft this year.
Because they've still got some holes. So that's interesting. It'd be interesting to know what their reasoning before or for doing that is. I think they got picked 26 and 27, which draft points value sits at about pick 10. So, there's still an opportunity to trade. Do they look at a pick in the 11 to 16 range with those picks? I don't know. Bonner is a good player, has a really, really good reputation. Obviously, he's had a couple of ACL injuries. You hope for North's sake and his sake that he's able to come in, play 20 games and make a really good contribution because he was a very, very highly rated junior. But pretty quiet. As you say, there's normally about 3 or 4 guys that North are linked to for a 10-year contract at about $100 million a year. So they didn't do that for the first time this year. So it's sort of business as usual, which is very North Melbourne-like of the last couple of years. I'd say a B. They didn't lose anyone of note. Bonner, I think, slots straight in to their best 22. And there's still, it's probably, as you say, like with those picks 26 and 27, that B could either go up to an A or go down to a C, depending on what they do with those picks and how they come to fruition.
I mean, it'll be interesting because, there is Cam Tahini. He's meant to be early mid-20s. If he slides down there, there's Sam De Koning, there's Cooper Stevens, Will Day. There's some big names down there. Yeah. I mean, there's even your mate, Elijah Taylor, as well.
Yeah, very good player, very good player. So that's maybe there's a couple of guys that they have earmarked in the 20s, and they're happy to do that.
I mean, it's a bit of an off in trade period. I mean, they haven't really lost anything apart from pick 8, but you'd say that obviously they've got 2 picks next to each other that they might be bundling together for a top 15 pick. Good players in the 20s, though. Maybe they've just put all their eggs on their baskets and said, right, these 2 will slip to there. Yeah. I mean, for me, I find it hard to give them over a C personally, purely because they lost pick 8.
Yeah.
But that could jump up exactly like you say, that if they suddenly pull out, say Tahini and Rivers are there at 26 and 27 and they pull them up, that suddenly looks like a B at A.
Yeah, and Bonner as well. Like, he's sort of the unknown. He hasn't played a lot of senior footy, and as you know, the GWS midfield is stacked. So if he gets 15 to 20 games and has a good season, then like we could look back in 12 months and it could be really good, because they got him for basically a pack of half-eaten peanuts. So that's really yeah.
And then a team that were really active to start with outgoings, suddenly went quiet was Port. They were linked to 3 or 4 players. There was talk that Sam Gray was leaving. Then there was that story on Ollie Wines was requesting a trade.
Yeah.
Fantasia was on his way to Port.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, they got rid of Frampton. And I thought the big one for me was Dougal Howard leaving. He was looking quite a player for them.
Yeah.
And Paddy Ryder. I mean, that being said, though, they have acquired a lot of picks. 12, 18 they've got now, which you'd say they're going to be able to pick up a very handy player for that. A lot of talk around Will Gould.
Yeah.
They're looking at him as the replacement.
There's some good young South Australian kids in that 10 to 30 range. They're probably thinking, if they could pick up like a Gould, or maybe even Stevens if he can drop to 12, and Gould maybe at 18. Jackson Mead it can go father son as well. So there'll be a bid come on him at some stage. So they could get 3 guys inside the top 30. They sort of said last year that they're going through a mini rebuild, and we sort of saw that when they got rid of a few players and they brought in Butters, Dersma and Rosie. But there's also that expectation of Port Adelaide that, like they just play finals. So, like they're sort of rebuilding on the run. So they got a couple of higher draft picks in the first round, but the Dougal Howard one, and like sort of speaking to a few Port Adelaide fans, like they were a bit flustered with that one. I don't think they really wanted to lose him, so it's an interesting one. They've downgraded from where they were. They had pick 10. They didn't get any senior bodies in, so it's probably a C-, D+. I don't think they would be overly happy with how it went. But as you say, it probably could have been a lot worse. Sam Powell-Pepper, like he didn't have the best season. There was talk that he might go to Victoria somewhere. Ollie Wines, who knows what happened there, but normally where there's smoke, there's fire. So whether something progresses there next year, that'll be interesting. So as I said, they seem to be rebuilding on the run, but there'll be an expectation that they've got to play finals. Even Ken Hinkley said that, I think, with 2 weeks to go, didn't he? So, so they're in an interesting spot for me, Port Adelaide.
I think probably a C's fair. I mean, this is another one as well. We keep saying it, sure, it could be a lot better by the end, because if they say pick up Mr. Gold, who we're big fans of him, and Dylan Williams, I mean, he's meant to be Robbie Gray reincarnated.
Yeah.
So you'd say if you pick up Dylan Williams and Will, you are literally in a real good spot, because you've got Rosie was brilliant, Dersma was brilliant, but showed a lot. He just needs muscle on, but he's got the heart. Port could be a force again.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting time for them next year.
Yeah, and what did you think of the press release that you're not allowed to call them Port anymore? They've got to be. Weird.
They're an interesting lot, Port Adelaide. Like Koshi, they're a banter club, aren't they? But then again, so is Carlton at the moment. So
I can't say though, I'm a big fan of the new logo for the 150, and I do like the fact that they've got a third alternate kit that kind of looks like what would happen if you washed a Geelong jersey on a real high temperature 50 times. Like, I really enjoyed it, but
yeah, solid by Port.
but that jersey is such a rip-off of Geelong's, isn't it?
Yeah.
It looks like someone's dug out a Geelong jersey 50 years ago. That's seen too much sun and it's faded.
The memes that were going around about 2 years ago, and it's like, what do they say? Oh, can I copy your homework? And they're like, oh yeah, but just make sure it's slightly different. You got the Geelong jumper here and the Port Adelaide jumper here.
It was one of the weirdest kit releases I've seen for a while, because one of my mates, big Port fan, he sent me it like the day before it was released and saying, oh, his mate worked at Port marketing department and this is what it looks like. And I'm like, is that the Geelong kit, but like from a distance?
Yeah.
I was like, Jesus, that's copyright. Well, a team that didn't need to do anything, reigning premiers, were Richmond, and they didn't really do anything. They lost Butler. I thought they got probably unders for Butler, with being he was probably brilliant in 2017.
Yeah.
Lost Ellis as well, which obviously is no big loss to them. I was surprised that he did go, because hard to say who replaces him at Richmond. But pick 19 is an interesting one, because all the talk is that Robertson is destined to end up at the Tigers, which, as we know, you're a big fan of him, so am I. Yeah. If he ends up on the halfback flank there, Richmond have probably won trade period.
If Richmond gets Devon Robertson at pick 19, I'll be calling the cops, the Richmond police station, and reporting a robbery, because that is just ridiculous if he gets through to pick 19. Like, that guy's a future captain, born leader, like he's 25 possessions a game. Like, he is just absolute spot on. So if somehow he gets through to Richmond after they got Riley Collier-Dawkins last year and Sydney Stack in the pre-season draft, or it was the other draft, wasn't it? A compensation draft. That's brilliant by Richmond. As you say, they lost a couple of players. In relation to Ellis, it's probably more of a security thing. Like, he signed a 5-year contract. He's got a couple of premierships. Did he want to leave Richmond? It's probably a question for him, but he set himself up. Like, he'll be a good leader for them in relation to, like, how things work at a successful club. So it's good for Gold Coast in that way. Hard to sort of rate, because, as you say, they don't really need anything, and they lost a couple of players. Butler was a fringe player. Ellis is in their best 22, but so you'd probably say a C. But, like, Richmond are going to be top 4 again next year. So
it's a C for me as well. And I think it'd be interesting, because Devon Robertson, if you look at the last 3 sliders against Phantom drafts and all the power rankings that come out about AFL, last year Riley Collier-Dawkins was meant to be top 10.
Yeah.
They got him at pick, what was it, 20?
Yeah. 20. Yeah.
Then there was Jack Higgins the year before. He was touted top 3. He slid to them.
Yeah.
Sydney Stack as well was a top 20.
Yeah.
They got him in the next to nothing draft.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get Devon Robertson. There's got to be something going on at AFL House.
Yeah, that's right. Well, our good mate Ryan, who blasted us for not giving him a shout out last show, he's a massive fan, and like he has some friends that know Devon quite well, and like, this guy is working his backside off leading up to November. So, like, he is legit, this kid. So if Richmond get him at pick 19, I'd definitely be on the phone to the Richmond cop shop and finding out, how Richmond got away with it.
Personally, hope he goes to Ryan's, just how he'll react to it. like genuinely hope he does. Like,
we might have to do some screenshots of our private chat group just to see his reaction.
Well, I know he's going mental because we're linked with Brodie Kemp. So in an ideal world, Robertson's there. We take Kemp. And
then Robertson goes to Richmond. Dear, we might not hear from him ever again.
He's already stopped following the football, so
Yeah.
that might finish him off. Now, our house was a mix of emotions at the end of the draft day because my wife is a big St Kilda fan, and they had quite the trade period, the busiest team in the trade period.
Yep.
Dougal Howard, great pickup. Paddy Ryder, great pickup. Hill, great pickup. Jones and Butler, they put all the eggs into the incoming basket. Absolute no draft picks to speak of up until 51. And only lost really Jones and Jack Stephen, who missed most of last year anyway with his mental health. So how do you rate that? I mean, for me, I thought it was I think they have had the best period. I actually give this an A star. I thought it was brilliant.
I based on, like obviously, the trade rumours come out, February, this person's linked to that club and vice versa, and this person wants to go there. St Kilda was that club this year that they said, right, we want these 5 guys, and they got every one of them. Last year, North Melbourne, they got their guys. The year before, Port Adelaide got their 3 or 4 players. So, St Kilda was that club. The only query I would say is, are any of them sort of A-grade players? Hill, you could argue to say that, yes, he's probably an upgrade on what they've got. Dougal Howard, like the ceiling for him is anything. The other guys are going to play senior footy. It probably improves their list, but is it going to be, from 10th to top 4, or are they going to sit in that 6 to 10, 11 range that they're in now? So yeah, for me, it's an A- because they got every target they said they wanted. But yeah, it's going to be one to watch next year as to how much value those guys add.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think there's probably an argument there. What you just said is totally true. Are they genuine A-grade players? For me, I think Hill is. I think he's something that they've lacked. Watching a lot of St Kilda games in this house, I think Hill is basically going to replace Jack Nooms.
Yeah.
Who incidentally comes to Carlton. And he's a lot better than Nooms. He's 10 times the footballer Nooms is. I think Butler is an absolute great get for them. I think that's something they lack, genuine goal sneak ability. And I think he replaces, because Stevens was used in that role a lot last year when he came back. I think he's an upgrade on Stephen for me down there. And I think Jones just adds that muscle they need, and Dougal Howard is phenomenal. Yeah. My only query is who's going to play tall forward. Yeah. Is Paddy Ryder now going to be the permanent Josh Bruce replacement?
Yeah, I think obviously Marshall was a revelation, wasn't he, in the ruck? So Ryder's going to be that key forward, pinch hit in the ruck for 5 to 10 minutes, same sort of role that he's had at Port Adelaide. I'd obviously say that Max King, they'd be expecting to play seniors this year. Spent most of the year in the reserves, coming back from his ACL injury. So I think they'd be hoping that he comes in and plays a substantial amount in the seniors next year. Obviously, sad news about Paddy McCartan today's come out that he's been delisted. I think they'll probably look at, re-rooking him, but it doesn't look promising for the young fella, like still having these issues. And he hasn't, like he hurt himself again in the pre-season this year just gone. So, but yeah, obviously King's a couple of years away from hitting his strap. So Ryder's a good get for them. But yeah, they do, with Bruce going, they don't have a dominant, real big key forward as such that specialises in that. So that is a query.
Oh, 100%. I mean, for me, I think it was a good trade period. And I think both of us as well wish Paddy the best of luck, like moving forward. Horrible to be hit down with that from such a young age, because he's a good footballer when he's on the park.
Yeah.
He's a very, very good footballer.
Yeah.
Saw a lot of Max King though last year. Playing for Sandy, he really did impress me. I think to go top 5 in the draft when you miss a whole year says a lot about you.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think he will be quite the footballer next year moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then a team that were linked heavily and probably not a big friend of Carlton's at the moment is Sydney. So Sydney probably did well because they were meant to lose Papley and pay 900 million draft picks for Danaher, and they ended up didn't doing it. I mean, for me, still to this day, and I said it at the time, why would Sydney pay such a high price when he's out of contract the year coming?
Yeah.
And just be like, bench it this year. It gives them a better safety net as well, in my opinion, because will Danaher play? At least they've got this year to, it's Essendon's problem.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly.
And they didn't really do anything. I mean, Lewis Taylor got Carlton's hopes up, didn't it? Because it was a replacement for Papley. They lost
that's what we were sort of thinking. And I think I think from memory, we swapped a couple of picks with Sydney.
Yeah, we did the third for a third and fourth.
Yeah, to enable them to get Taylor. So when that happened, it was like, well, it's a formality. Like, we're going to get Papley. You know, we had videos made up. We had memes made up. There's about $1,000 worth of alcohol just sitting in my fridge to celebrate Papley coming to Carlton. And when it didn't happen, like Sydney, similar to Essendon, they've picked up another small forward. They didn't lose anything. Darcy Cameron, with them picking up Noel in the mid-season draft, probably sat third in their ruck stock. So you can't really say or fault them at all. And they've got a top 10 pick, so that they'd be pretty happy with their position. They'd be hoping that Tom Papley, they can sort of keep him happy and that he's feeling okay. Because you could sort of see it was sort of holding him down back into the first half of the season. He was going brilliantly. So, I guess you'd say a C+ for me. Weren't big players in the end. There was a lot of talk about them being that. But, they just did what they had to do and they held all their stars.
Yeah, for me, I think that's a fair assessment. I thought Taylor's a great get for him. He showed quite a lot of promise at Brisbane. They haven't lost anyone. Another year into Blakey as well. I mean, he was a revelation for him last year. He really got better and better as the year went on. Pick 5 gives him a lot of options as well in the trade period.
Yeah.
I kind of do think, and I've got like this horrible feeling that if Brodie Kemp didn't have got injured, I reckon we would have got Papley. I reckon pick 9 would have got Papley for us. I firmly believe they would have then said, "Well, tell you what, we'll take Kemp. We've got someone who can play centre half forward, and then rotate through the mid. Brilliant. He's a backup for Danaher if we don't get him." I personally think that's what cost us. I think the ACL meant that Sydney had no backup in the draft. There was no tall forwards in the top 10.
That's exactly right. I mean, as we said, like at the very start of the show, like Fisher McCassie is probably the premium tall forward of this draft at this stage. So, he's going to go from that 13 to 20 range. Like Essendon said to Sydney, if you can't, you're not going to be able to replace Danaher, but you've got to give us someone of value. Those stars didn't align for either of those clubs. So, it is what it is. So it'll be interesting to see how the whole Sydney and Essendon thing plays out next year. It's something that I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you'd imagine he ends up at Sydney, wouldn't you? By the reports, you'd imagine he's there. He's next year, and he for free.
I'd think so, and especially if, like for his own personal well-being, touch wood, like he has a good season, that might renew his interest in staying at Essendon. But if he has a similar year to what he has the last 2 years, like he's gone, absolutely max gone.
Oh well, yeah, I think he's definitely gone, definitely gone. And then a team where the stars did align. I thought, for me, this was one of the best trade periods. Tim Kelly, I don't think they paid that much for him. No, especially when Geelong were saying they wanted 3 first rounders and Dustin Martin.
Yeah.
I thought they showed great professionalism. I mean, at the end of the day, it cost West Coast what, pick 33, 52,
14.
14, and 24.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
took them 4 picks.
Yeah.
But for me, I don't think too bad because they did get 52 back in a future third, so
Yeah.
kind of evened out in a way. But for me, Kelly in that midfield, he's for me the missing piece of West Coast.
Yeah, for me, West Coast are the team of the trade period for me. People will say they gave up a lot, but at the end of the day, West Coast are in their premiership window right now. They won last year. They were probably a top 4 side that, they fell away at the end of the year. But Tim Kelly, what did he get? 32 and kick 3 against West Coast in the semi-final. So for me, it's an A+ because they had one job to do, and it was to get Tim Kelly. So we're talking Tim Kelly, Luke Shuey, Elliot Yeo, Jack Redden, Andrew Gaff, Daniel Venables, who was out a lot injured last year. He's a premiership player. The emergence of Dom Sheed as well. Like, that midfield is just absolutely chock-a-block. So, yeah, they lost some picks, but like what we said with Geelong's increased their tenure in the draft, which they probably need. But West Coast hasn't got an old list. They're in their premiership window. They had to get Tim Kelly. They got him. They probably gave up one too many draft picks, but it doesn't matter. They got the man they need, and they'll be pushing top 4 for sure next year. So it's an A+ for me for West Coast.
Yeah, I think an A+ as well. I mean, pure list management won it as well. Just identify your need, get it done early, sit back and relax. There's stories that they had little nibbles at players as well towards the end as trades were dragging out. There was a rumour I heard the other day that they asked the question about Keith, which would have been absolutely sensational if they managed to do that.
Yeah.
They do have the pick in that range that he went for.
Yeah.
But for me, yeah, you would say they're the team to beat. That midfield of Yeo, Gaff, Kelly is just terrifying. Shuey, it's got goals, it's got possessions, it's got everything on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Defensive pressure. You got goal kicking mids. So like there's not many holes in that midfield. So I can't wait to see Richmond versus West Coast when the fixture comes out this year. I'm highlighting that one. That's going to be an absolute cracker next year.
Do you know who they remind me of?
Yeah.
They remind me of the Houston Rockets this year.
Yeah, or the Clippers even.
Yeah, with old laugh a lot, Kawhi.
Yeah, Kawhi, the fun guy.
He's still not the king of LA though. There's only one king.
Well, they lost to their Suns today. What was going on there?
Because they don't have LBJ, the real king of Los Angeles.
They don't have LBJ. Let me pull up my discussions with you from 2 days ago.
If you're watching LeBron, I loved your work last night.
Solid.
And then a team that weren't really linked with anyone out either. The Doggies, the Bulldogs, acquiring Bruce and Keith, the trade that took 2 years to happen for me.
Yeah.
He finally got through.
Yeah.
It is trading the wood as well. Keith and a future third for a future third and a future second and a third. So it roughly works out in English as pick 30.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so he had a really solid year at Adelaide. So I think they'd be pretty happy to get him. Josh Bruce is not a world beater, but he's a serviceable footballer. He's probably ahead of like a Josh Shackey. So, he's a 30 to 40 goal player every year. They were adamant they didn't want to trade pick 13. They didn't. So they'd be pretty happy with their overall tenure to hold that. Got a couple of guys, fills a couple of needs. I'd say it's a B-. They didn't get any superstars, but they didn't lose anyone of note. So Like that, they're a young club, like a strong young midfield that's building, and they filled a couple of gaps. So yeah, B minus, no more, no less for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like for me, I found Bruce weird because he's actually more expensive than Keith,
Yeah,
which for me, Keith, I thought was on the verge of all Australian form.
yeah,
Like one of the best intercept defenders in the comp, rebounds well, has got all the facets, average cricketer, great footballer.
yeah,
But yeah, I'd say it's a C plus and it B minus.
yeah,
It's in that range because they have got pick 13, which you'd imagine they'll turn into someone relatively good. I mean, looking Will Gould's around there, your mate Fisher's around there.
yeah,
They probably don't need Luke Jackson. They've already got a ruckman, but
yeah,
interesting. A guy that I actually covered in another video earlier, Trent Bianco,
yeah,
is around there, and he for me, he suits the doggy style of play. He's
absolutely.
light, nimble, he's quick.
Yeah,
It's like having two Johannesons on the halfback flank.
absolutely. Yeah, and he was captain of his TAC Cup side, so like he's a leader. So yeah, he could be one that would be really good for the Bullies. And like I said, they didn't want to trade pick 13, so they've obviously got someone in mind for that pick.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. That concludes the the trade period. Our next video will be the draft when that finishes, and we can combine all these videos into one.
Absolutely. There was good chatting with you again for the last hour and a half.
Yeah, and if you've stayed till the end of the video, you're the real MVP. I've been Dan, that's Dane, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Right, what I'll do is I'll stop recording